Hello, friends. Welcome. So glad you're here today. We get to visit the Oregon State Capitol today, and I'm excited that you're here to join us. Miss Leslie, who is our host from the Capitol today. And she is going to guide us on this trip today through the Capitol. This is virtual, so I'm not there and I didn't get to go there. So Leslie is going to guide us, and she's got a very cool program that gives us a fun virtual tour. So pay careful attention because she's going to stop every once in a while and ask you questions to see what you're learning or if you have questions as we go. So pay close attention to her and as she's leading us. And Miss Leslie, thank you so much for being here. We're excited to tour the Capitol with you. So go ahead, it's all yours.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks to everyone here at Eugene 4J. I'm so excited to participate in this program with you. So like Amy said, my name is Leslie and I work for your Oregon State Capitol. This is the People's Building. This belongs to all of us, you and me. I'm standing in front of a digital photo of your Capitol. I'm not here in real life, right? The Capitol is currently open to authorized personnel only, but here in a few minutes, we're gonna walk through those revolving doors behind me, and we're gonna experience it virtually and kind of take a trip through time. And the reason I say that is because this is Oregon's third Capitol building. It was open to the public in 1938. And so inside the building, you're going to see a lot of artwork and symbolism that reflects the thinking of Oregon in the 30s. But this is also a living building where things are happening right now. And in fact, this is where your Oregon State Legislature passes bills, which are just ideas, right? Ideas into law. And so those laws that are passed in this building impact our future, they impact our present. And so you're going to see that theme of past, present, and future all throughout the building today. And that's why I like to say we're taking a trip through time. Before we enter, I just want to start with a quick land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge the many tribes and bands who call Oregon their ancestral territory. We honor the continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes here in Oregon who have ties to this place, and we thank them for continuing to teach us how we might all be here together. So before we start, has anybody been to the Capitol before? Maybe anybody seen it from the outside? Raise of hands, show of hands. I see some heads shaking no. Do we have any hands up? Yes. I see a couple. Okay, I see one person nodding. So it looks like maybe a few of you have been in the Capitol before. So that's great. Well, without further ado, we're going to share our screen here and we're going to go right on in. So just to give you a little bit of a view of where you're standing, we just went through those revolving doors behind me, and we're in this big round room that we like to call the rotunda. So there's examples of some of that artwork that you're going to see throughout the building today. We're going to begin our tour right here at the Oregon State Seal. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So this is Oregon State Seal. It says 1859 at the bottom because that was the year that Oregon became a state. And around the outside of the seal, you have 33 stars. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit and let you look up over 106 feet at the bottom of the ceiling in the Capitol Rotunda. This is actually right underneath that tower that you see from far away. And here again, you see 33 stars. These ones are made out of gold. And that middle star in the middle, we like to say is Oregon, right? So we have 33 stars on our ceiling and 33 stars around our seal. I'm gonna pull up a better image of the seal here just so you can get a nicer view. So here's your first question. It's a softball, okay? At the top of your seal, you've got the bald eagle, and that represents the United States. We have 33 stars, and we know that there are 50 states in the United States. So what number state do you think Oregon was when it became a state, where the bald eagle is standing on top of a really big shield. And this shield, I like to think it's a little heart-shaped. It wasn't really designed that way, but that might help you remember that Oregon's birthday was Valentine's Day, February 14th, 1859. You have two ships here in this shield. So you've got an American steamship and also a British warship. So one is the British ship is actually leaving the shores and the American ship is coming in. And that symbolizes a couple different things, a change in technology and also a change in government. Here you've got a setting sun. That's because Oregon is a Western state and the sun sets in the west. You have symbols of our rich natural resources. So you have an elk, and a mountain range. And in the middle, you have the ox-drawn wagon. And what do we think that represents? Any guesses? I see Savannah's hand. I'm going to ask her to unmute.
The Oregon Trail.
Absolutely, Savannah, that's perfectly correct. So the ox-drawn wagon is the Oregon Trail, which is what was taken by the Oregon pioneers, and we're going to talk about them in a little bit. We have the Union, that was Oregon's motto. It's currently she flies with her own wings, so that changed. And then we also have some symbolism of our agriculture and industry here at the bottom. All right. So now I'm going to move on to some other symbols of Oregon's history here that we see. So we're still kind of in the past as we're in this room, and we're going to go through the murals. And get ready, I've got another quick pop quiz for you. So we're going to start here. We're going to go in chronological order. And this is Captain Robert Gray, a man named Captain Robert Gray, and he is standing at the mouth of a river that way back in 1792 was known as the Great River of the West. And he's pictured here trading fur pelts with Native Americans along the banks of this river. And so my question for you is what you think this river is known as today. And I'm going to give you a hint. Gray arrived here on his ship, which he sailed around the earth or around the world 2 times. And his ship's name was the Columbia Redeviva. And Gray didn't discover this river first. He wasn't the first person to discover the river, but he is the person who named it. Again, his ship was called the Columbia Redeviva. So what do you think Gray named this river? And I see Rain's hand up.
The Columbia River.
The Columbia River, that's correct, Rain. That's excellent. So that's Robert Gray at the mouth of the Columbia River in 1792. We're going to move forward a little bit further in time here. We're passing a quote by Plato. He has some important quotes about democracy that you can find throughout the building. And I bet you know who these 2 men are in the center of this second mural. This is about 13 years later after Gray came to the Columbia River and named it. So we're now in 1805. And these 2 gentlemen were sent by Thomas Jefferson to lead a Corps of Discovery mission and explore Oregon country. And I'm wondering if someone might be able to tell me who these 2 men are. And I see Callie's hands. Oh, I just lost Callie. How do I get him back? There.
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark. Absolutely. Now, these 2 gentlemen were also joined by some other really important members of this journey. So we have Sacagawea or Sacagawea here on the right-hand side of the mural. She was a Shoshone woman. She spoke multiple languages and she interpreted for the tribe, and she also helped them find food and safe passage along the way. Another really important member of the party was York. Now, York is credited as the first African-American with enslaved status to cross the continent and explore Oregon country. So he was enslaved by Clark, and unfortunately, a lot of his story was kind of lost to the condition of slavery. We don't hear a lot of it from his own words. We've gleaned a lot from Clark's journals, but he was also a very important guide and an important figure in this journey. Now, we talked about that theme, past, present, and future, and this is a really great example. This this mural. So the folks in this party are actually pictured here at a place called Celilo Falls. Celilo Falls was a very important fishing ground for Native American peoples here in Oregon. And it was here back in the 30s when this building was constructed. But in the 50s, when they built the Dalles Dam, the Celilo village flooded, permanently changing a way of life for many. So this is another example of something that was here in the past that is no longer present in the future. Alrighty. Just 2 more murals here in the rotunda before we move on and go upstairs and continue our trip through time. And now we are a little bit further along. We're in 1836, so more and more people are coming to Oregon country. And this mural depicts a man named Dr. John McLaughlin, and he's meeting the first missionary women to cross the continent in 1836. Their names are Eliza Spalding and Narcissa Whitman. They're pictured here. Now, McLaughlin, he was not an Oregon citizen or a US citizen at the time. He was a British citizen. And he was the head, or we call him maybe the CEO, of a company called the Hudson's Bay Fur Trading Company. You might remember from the other mural that the fur trade industry was a really big industry at the time. And so McLaughlin had a lot of control over some of the local commerce and economy. And again, he worked for the British government. Now, the British government, they wanted control over the area. They didn't want all of these resettlers, these Euro-American resettlers, to be coming. And so they gave him explicit directions that if he were to see any people coming on across the continent, that he was supposed to send them back. And did he do that? No, he actually ended up helping these resettlers. He provided them some supplies. And as a result of that, he lost his job. And he lost his British citizenship. For a while, he was kind of an orphan of the world. He did eventually become a US citizen, and many years after his death, the Oregon State Legislature named him the Father of Oregon. So this is Dr. John McLaughlin, known now as the Father of Oregon. I like to tell that story just kind of in thinking about how sometimes you do things that are hard, right? Sometimes it's hard to do something that you think is right. And maybe there are consequences to that. And then the last mural, get ready for another pop question. And this one I'm going to call on a couple different ones of you. So we'll call on a few people for this one. So this is the first wagon migration. And this took place in 1843. So this is the Oregon Trail that we heard about a little bit when we were looking at our state seal, right? Now, eventually, over 400,000 people would make the very treacherous journey from Independence, Missouri to the Willamette Valley. It was not easy. They were walking 15 miles a day for several months. The total journey was over 2,000 miles. And I know people say, walking, that's no way, right? They've got wagons. Why wouldn't they ride in the wagons? Well, they weren't riding in the wagons because the wagons were full of all of their personal items. So they had to walk alongside them. So eventually, like I said, 400,000 people took this migration. But in this early migration here in 1843, we're looking at about 900 pioneers who came in this first migration. So here's my question for you. How do these 900 people who first took the Oregon Trail from Independence, Missouri to the Willamette Valley, how many do you think were children? How many were kids? Any guesses? And there's no wrong answer because this was really surprising to me. I see Hannah's hand. Oh, I just lost her. Here's Hannah. Hannah, did you have a guess?
3.
3? That's a good guess. Who else has a guess for me? Gil, I see Gil's got a hand up.
And 4.
4. Okay, think a little higher. Ryan?
I'm gonna have to guess about 2,008,362.
Well, that's a very specific and very large guess. That's a good guess. We're actually looking at out of a total of 900. So we'll take one more guess. This one from Rose.
7.
7, Rose is guessing. Well, would you believe it that out of the 900 pioneers who first took this journey, 600 were children under the age of 16. So that 600 is 2 out of every 3 people were kids. Now, most mass migrations happen when people are escaping something like war or famine, but this migration is different because people were actually moving or migrating by choice. And they were making this journey because they were seeking new opportunity here in Oregon country. And so when we talk about the pioneers, it's really important to think, what does that word mean, pioneer or pioneering? And when we say the word pioneer, we don't mean first, right? There are many tribal communities here in Oregon. These were not the first people to live here. But when we say the word pioneering, we mean maybe willing to try something new. And you're going to see signs of that pioneering spirit here in Oregon throughout the building and in our legislation that's passed. So do we have any questions about this room before we go on to the next room? We're going to take a trip through time here in a moment and go kind of up to present day. And we probably have time for maybe 1 or 2 questions. So maybe somebody in the crowd, if anybody has a hand. I don't think I see any. Am I missing?
Connor, do you have a hand? Do you have a question, Connor?
How do do they make a coin of that big gold thingy? The gold circle.
Yeah, so this is actually, that's a great question. So the state seal, you'll see it on a lot.
I'm into collecting coins.
Yeah, you'll see it on a lot of different things. So it's on our flag. You can find in our Capitol store little souvenirs. So it wouldn't be a real coin, like a real coin that you could spend money on, but I'm sure that they have some souvenirs that are little trinkets that have the state seal on them that are shiny.
No, I mean like collector coin.
Yeah, they have some shiny metal coins that are not ones that you can spend. They're not real money, but we'll send a link to the Capitol store in the chat at the end of this presentation. And
what is it called? Is it like the seal?
Yeah, so this is the Oregon State Seal. That's a great question.
Okay.
And it's actually, I know it looks gold, but it's polished bronze. So they just polish it to make it shiny like gold. There are only 2 things in the building that are made out of real gold. And the one are those stars. And the other is the Golden Pioneer, or the Golden Man or Oregon Pioneer statue that we're going to see at the end of this tour. That's a great question. And we have time for one more. I don't know if Miss Amy wants to call on one more student for me.
Okay, how about Maddie?
I was wondering who painted the murals.
Oh, that is a really great question. And I should know the answer to the artist, but I don't off of the top of my head. So I'll get that information to Amy and make sure to have her pass that on to you. I will tell you that they were painted when the Capitol was constructed. And one thing we really like to talk about with these murals is that, these are artist interpretations of a moment in time. So that's a really poignant question, that these are coming from an artist's perspective, but they aren't necessarily historical representations of Oregon's past. And so one of the things that I like to challenge students to do is to think about, what murals might you put in the rotunda today if we were constructing the building today to reflect the Oregon that you know? And maybe those murals would look different if you were designing them. All right, great. Well, we have plenty of time for questions. We'll make sure to ask more questions as we go. But for the sake of time, I'm going to put them on pause for a second and hop forward to the House chamber. So we're going to go up these stairs here and into this room that says House of Representatives at the top. And I'm going to start by just playing a quick introduction from my colleague, Laura.
Welcome to the Oregon State House of Representatives. Bills become laws and votes happen here. The theme of this chamber is transparency. Let's take a moment to talk about what that word means. If something is transparent, it is not hidden. It is easily seen or clear. In government, transparency means that citizens can see how their elected officials vote and serve their communities. If you look at the large mural in the center of the room, you will see an example of transparency from Oregon's past. This mural is a representation by the artist Barry Faulkner of something important that happened in Shampooey way back in 1843.
Okay, we're going to stop there. And that actually gave us our answer. So my colleague Laura, who's observing today, sent me a message that the artists, to answer your question, who painted the Rotunda murals were Barry Faulkner and Frank Schwartz. And this is another mural by Barry here in the center of your Oregon State House of Representatives. Now, that was a big word that Laura used in the introduction to this chamber, the word transparency, but really it just means clear or easily seen, right? So that means that the things that happen in this room are not happening in secret. Government operates based on that concept of transparency, meaning anyone can watch and participate in the process. So this is a really great example of transparency from Oregon's past, and it'll tie into what happens in this room today. So we left off the rotunda downstairs at the Great Wagon Migration of 1843. So some pioneers were coming across the country on the Oregon Trail, right? Well, they were getting settled here in the valley, and here they're pictured at Shampooey. That's where Shampooey State Park is today. And now, not everyone who was living in Shampooey at the time was a resettler or a pioneer. Some of them were French Canadian fur trappers. Some of them worked for the Hudson's Bay Company and were British. And so these folks, they didn't all agree on how they were going to govern themselves. They were kind of in favor of different forms of government. And they needed to come to a solution because they were facing some conflicts. So one was that there were some wolves attacking their livestock meaning pigs, horses, cows. And another issue was that a wealthy property owner passed away and there was no real way for anyone to inherit his property. And so they needed some type of rule. And, you know, we govern ourselves with all kinds of rules today. How many of you, just a show of hands, how many of you ride along with family members in a car? You know, do you notice that they stop at a red light? Do they stop at red lights? Yeah, absolutely, right? And why do we stop at red lights? Well, that's to keep other people safe. And so we have all kinds of rules that we use to govern ourselves and make sure that we're existing in society together. And these folks needed that. And so they took a vote way back in the day on what type of government they wanted. And they drew a literal line in the sand here, right? And the ones who wanted to be part of the US form of government stood on one side, and the ones who wanted to be part of the British form of government stood on the other. And would you believe it? When it first shook out, the vote ended in a tie. Now, these folks, again, they were voting transparently, meaning they were voting in front of their neighbors. Everybody saw how their neighbors were voting. And so when it ended in a tie, a man named Mr. Meek called out, and a couple French Canadian fur trappers switched sides and voted in favor of the American form of government. And this really paved the way for Oregon eventually becoming a state in the United States. And this illustrates a couple different things, that theme of transparency, but also that every vote counts, and that sometimes you need to have a discussion to reach a majority vote. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to tie that into what happens in this room today. This is your House chamber, and this is where you have 60 members of your Oregon State House of Representatives. They represent 60 different districts here in Oregon. And they're elected by people who live in those districts to represent them in this chamber. And what do they do here? Does anybody know what happens in this room? What do your state representatives do? Any guesses? I think I saw one hand. Gil, you have a guess?
I just have stuff.
I didn't quite hear that. Can you repeat that?
Just having stuff. They just They decided stuff.
They decided stuff.
Yeah, they decide stuff. That's insightful. They decide what kinds of rules we have here in Oregon. And those rules can be about all kinds of stuff, right? It can be about our education, our healthcare system, anything like that. So they vote, and they vote on bills, which are just ideas for laws. And those ideas can come from everyday citizens just like you and me, and they impact our future. Absolutely. So when they vote, just like the people way back in Shampooey, they don't vote in secret. They vote out loud, and there's a couple different ways they can vote. They can say yes or no. They can register a thumbprint or a fingerprint using an electronic reader. Or one of my favorite ways is that on their desks, they actually have these little buttons. They've got a green button for yes and a red button for no. And when they vote, their names will light up green or red on the reader boards. And that's how you can see how they vote. You can watch them vote either by sitting here in real life in this viewing gallery, or in cases like today when we're open to authorized personnel only, you can watch them vote online streaming. Now, a couple other things before we leave this room, I just want to point out, we've got the Douglas fir tree on the carpet. That's Oregon State tree. We'll have you notice when we enter the Senate, which looks kind of similar, what kind of tree they have. And also there are all these names above the chambers. This is another example of that past, present, and future theme. Back in the day when this building was constructed, over 150 names were selected to represent people important to Oregon, and only 6 of those names between both chambers are women. And so one thing, again, that we challenge students to think about is, if we were to select new names today, would we maybe think about including different names to represent more of the diversity that we have here in Oregon? Okay. I'm going to move out. We're going to go out this back door, and we're going to take a look at a couple of portraits really quickly. Just want to touch on 2 pioneering people here in Oregon. So after a governor serves, they have the opportunity to have a portrait done. And this is Governor Barbara Roberts. And Barbara Roberts, she was a very important or pioneering person here in Oregon. She served as the 34th governor from 1991 to 1995, and she was the first female to be elected governor of Oregon. So that was pioneering in itself, because she served at a time when women were not widely represented in positions of government leadership. But she was also pioneering for her ideas, and she had a child specifically who had some special needs. And she began her career in politics to advocate for the educational rights of children with disabilities. And so that was kind of her pioneering contributions to the state of Oregon. And it's also really a great example about how anyone can make a difference in Oregon's government. You know, she started off as a mother who just wanted to advocate for her child, and she eventually held the highest office of government here in Oregon. So we're also going to take a look at this portrait here, and I'm going to zoom a little closer. This other portrait is Governor Tom McCall, and I'm wondering if somebody can maybe tell me where he's standing. Where is McCall standing? I'm going to try to call on someone I haven't called on yet. Do I see anybody with a hand who might know where McCall is standing? Alex has a hand up.
Is he standing at a beach?
He is. That's great, Alex. Actually, before I let you go, what is your favorite beach here in Oregon?
Oh,
Do you have a favorite beach?
Newport.
Newport. Okay, great. So Oregon has a very pioneering law related to beaches here in Oregon, and it was signed into law by Governor Tom McCall. So when you go to Newport Beach, Alex, or when any of you go to your favorite beach, you might notice that it's a public beach. Anyone can walk on the beach in Oregon. In fact, there's no part of Oregon's beach that isn't public. And that was a first We were the first state in the nation to make all of our coastline public, and we're one of only a few states in the nation to have public beaches today. Governor McCall also is famous for another piece of pioneering legislation called the Bottle Bill. And you can read a little bit more about that using our reader theater and our lesson plans. But that relates to a deposit that you put on cans and bottles. So every time you turn a bottle back in, you get 10 cents, and that encourages you to recycle. That was also a law that Oregon passed in its state legislature that was signed into law by a governor. And it is also a law that's kind of pioneering in the sense that we were the first to have a law like that. And it was kind of a forward-thinking law at the time. Well, we've talked about two governors. Are you ready to see a space where the governor might sign a bill into law? Just maybe a nod if you're excited. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to start off by playing a short video for you that kind of explains what happens in this room.
Governor signs a bill. Before a governor signs a bill into law, it must go through many steps. After a bill is introduced in the House or the Senate, it goes to a committee where the people of Oregon can share or testify if they like the idea. These discussions take place in hearing rooms where legislators mostly hear and listen before they discuss and vote. Do you know how old you must be to testify in a committee? You might be surprised to learn that you can be any age. Let me tell you a quick story of how students like you have changed the way we live here in Oregon. In 2015, school children at Sunnyside Environmental School in Portland were studying the effects of polystyrene foam, commonly known as styrofoam, on the environment. They learned that styrofoam can take centuries to decompose and often pollutes our waterways. The students had an idea for a law to reduce the use of styrofoam in our communities. Every day, schools throughout the state of Oregon were serving lunch to hundreds of students on polystyrene foam plates and trays. The students at Sunnyside wrote to their state representative, Representative Nose, with an idea to ban the use of styrofoam in schools. Representative Nose liked the students' idea, so he sponsored their idea as a bill. Before the representatives could vote on the bill in the House chamber, the people of Oregon had a chance to share with a House committee why they thought it was a good or bad idea. The process of sharing your opinion with a committee is called testifying, and it takes place in a special room called a hearing room. You can remember that it is called a hearing room because it is the room where your legislators are hearing or listening. Also remember that a person of any age may testify. The students at Sunnyside testified in front of the House committee about their idea, and the bill went to the big chamber where all the representatives voted on it. The majority voted yes, and the students saw the board in the House light up with green dots. Next, it went before the Senate. They loved the idea too, and their board also lit up green. The House and Senate both agreed that the idea from the Sunnyside students should become a law. Then the governor signed the bill into law in this very room.
I just think that is so cool, right? So we just left the House chamber, and that's where your state representatives vote, yes or no, on an idea for a law. But before they vote, there's a chance for you to weigh in on that process and a chance for you to provide your opinion about whether or not you think they should be voting yes or no, whether you like the bill. And that's through the committee process that you can testify. And I don't know if you caught it, but in the video, my colleague Laura said, you can be any age and testify. You can also be any age to write your senator or your representative with an idea. And so you can find on our website a link where you can type in your address and see who represents you, and you can share your idea for a law. So think about that. If you leave here with anything else, I just want you to leave here knowing like you can participate in that process and make a difference. And so maybe you have an idea that you'd like to share with a member. And this is the room where a governor, after it passes both chambers, so it has to pass both chambers, but it can originate from either one. But after it passes both chambers, it comes here, and this is where a governor can sign it. Now, if a governor doesn't sign it, it's called a veto. The governor might be able to veto the bill or say that no, the governor doesn't want the bill. And there's also an opportunity for the legislators to override the governor's veto. So there's several different ways that it could pan out, but the main thing to know is that it goes through that process where it gets voted on in both chambers, and then it gets signed into law here. It can also get signed into law really anywhere. The governor doesn't have to be in this room, but this is a ceremonial room where you'll oftentimes see bill signing ceremonies. You'll sometimes see our governor also standing at this podium, doing some press conferences. Now, our current governor is Governor Kate Brown, and we actually have all of Oregon's governors along the walls here in the governor's ceremonial office. So her picture is all the way there at the end. The two other portraits that are in this room are portraits of the father of Oregon, John McLaughlin, and also the mother of Oregon. Her name is Tabitha Moffett Brown, and she was a pioneer woman who founded our first orphanage. Are there any questions about this room before I move on to our next stop? I think I see Orion's hand.
This isn't about this room, but what position do you have?
Oh, I work in visitor services. So we're the nonpartisan welcoming arm of the Capitol, and my role is guest services coordinator. Any questions related to this room or the governor's office? Ryan, do you have a hand? So we just exited that room. We're going down the hall here. And before we enter into the Senate chamber, I want to show you this really cool thing here. This is another example of past, present, and future here in Oregon. These are our phone booths. And this was just really new technology back in the day when the Capitol was built. Back in the day, not only did people not have cell phones, but a lot of people didn't have public phones at home. Maybe they shared phones with their neighbors on what was called like a community line. And so this was a really interesting thing back in the day. Now it's mostly kind of as an exhibit here to show you what it used to look like. But people used to sit in there and they'd have a chance to have a private conversation on a phone. They put some money in the phone. And the reason that we share that is because here in the Senate chamber, we'll talk about a little bit how it might be different from the House here in a second, but I want to share quickly, the center of the mural here represents Salem way back when it became a state, when Oregon became a state. So this is downtown Salem. And we know that Oregon's birthday is February 14th, right? Valentine's Day. But would you believe that the people of Salem didn't find out until March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, that Oregon became a state? And that was because we didn't have cell phones back then, right? So the news had to travel by telegraph, and it could only go as far from DC as St. Louis, Missouri. And then from telegraph, it had to take a stagecoach, and then it had to take a ship. So eventually somebody rode a horse from Portland down to Salem with the news, and it took over a month for that news to travel here. And I talk about that within the context of those phone booths, because this room is just like the House in that this is a space where your legislators are voting on ideas for laws. But back in the day when they voted, how do you think we found out? We didn't have cell phones, right? Well, we had reporters, and a lot of times they'd sit here at the sides and they'd watch what was happening in this room and the proceedings. And then as soon as the vote happened, they'd run out to that payphone and they'd call in the story to the newspapers. And you'd hear about what happened in this room the next day in the paper when you read it. So just kind of goes to show how technology has changed over time. What else might be different about this room compared to the House? We'll maybe take one or two people just guessing something they see that's different. I see Maddie's got a hand.
The carpet's different. It has like fish and wheat instead of the Douglas fir tree.
Perfect, Maddie. That's very insightful. So the fish and the wheat represent Oregon's second and third top industries. So the Douglas fir tree represented that timber industry, which was our top industry at the time when the building was constructed. And this is for fishing and agriculture. Very insightful. What else is different in this room? I see a hand from Hannah or Viola, sorry.
That the portraits are different.
Yeah, the portrait is different. So this one depicting.
And in the room of the murals, which one's your favorite mural?
Ooh,
And how long did it take?
How long did it take for the murals to be constructed?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure how long in total for the murals, but the building itself took, well, the second building burnt down in 1935, and the third building broke ground in 38. And so they started construction, I think, on this third building in 36. So it took a little under 2 years total for this whole building to be constructed. But the murals, I'm not sure specifically. I do know they were painted on cloth and then installed around the time that the building was constructed. So sometime within that window of that project. I don't know that I have a favorite. I kind of, my favorite might be the house mural, the shampooing mural. And I think that's just because I really like what that represents to me is, you know, that concept of people participating in democracy and sharing ideas and disagreeing civilly. All of those things are things that inspire me. So that's a great question. One more question, and I see Wyatt's got a hand.
That there's two like black things in the right and left corners.
Yeah, those are speakers. I think you're referring to these things here. And I think there may be some speakers in the house, but they're in a slightly different location. But those are all really great, insightful things. One thing I like to point out is that there are fewer desks. There are only 30 desks in this room. And that's because even though we have 60 representatives, we have 30 state senators. They serve twice as long. They serve 4 years instead of 2. Both of them have no term limits. But because they are representing more of Oregon, there are fewer of them, so they're representing twice as much space, so twice as many people. Now, I bet all of you are excited for our final stop, right? The Gold Man. So I'm going to play a quick video. We're going to walk up the stairs and see that Oregon Pioneer statue. Are you ready? Okay, here we go.
Tucked behind unmarked doors and accessed through hidden corridors lie the 121 steps that lead to the observation deck atop the rotunda. From beneath the shadow of the 23-foot-tall Golden Pioneer, visitors get a 360-degree view of the Capitol grounds, Salem, Willamette Valley, and beyond. Historic buildings leading from the Willamette River once led to the original west-facing capitals. The current capitol opens north to an array of malls and government buildings modeled after the nation's capital. And in 1984, Oregon school children took it upon themselves to raise money to re-gild the Golden Pioneer with over 12,000 sheets of pure gold. Yet another example of how you as citizens can make a difference by getting involved.
So here we go. And now we are on top of the observation deck and viewing the Oregon Pioneer and historic downtown Salem. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a view here. This is our Capitol Mall. These trees were just recently all blooming with cherry blossoms. And, you know, just like the pioneers and just like the news of how Oregon became a state and how that traveled to Salem, this statue also made a journey. And this statue, a lot of times people will ask us, well, is it a real person? And the answer is no. This is a symbol of that Northwestern spirit or a symbol of those early Oregon resettlers. And so he made a journey just like those that he symbolizes. And he was sculpted in a New Jersey studio by an artist named Ulrich Ellerhusen. And he was placed on a boat that went down the East Coast, through the Gulf of Mexico, up the Panama Canal, and up the West Coast of Portland. And then finally, when he made it here to Salem, then he was transported on a back of a flatbed truck from Portland to Salem. And after he made it here, it took 3 days just to get him on the top of our building. They had to use a pulley and lever system, which I think is kind of cool. And he's got in his hand an axe, and he's got a wagon cover over his shoulder. So he's really representing those Northwestern resettlers, and he's facing north and looking west also. So do we have any questions about the pioneer or about anything else you saw today? I see lots of hands, so no worries. We can answer quite a few questions as long as we're good with time. Amy, are we okay with time?
Yeah, we can take a couple, these 3 questions, and then we'll probably need to wrap it up.
All right, sounds good. Well, I see Bree's hand. Bree, do you have a question?
How long did it take to build that?
How long did it take to construct the Pioneer? I'm not sure the total amount of time it took for him. That's one that I don't know. I know that it took a long time for him to be transported. They had to do lots of different casts. So a good long while, but it was part of the installation of this building. I see Bob's got a hand.
What did the pioneers do to the natives?
So the Pioneer is not a real person, but I think the question was about the relationship with Native Americans. So oops, sorry, I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
That's my sister just talking to my mom.
Oh, okay. Yep. So, that's a complicated history, right? And so one of the things that we encourage people to do is to check out the Oregon Tribes lesson plans as well, to hear that story from their perspective. Absolutely. So on our website, we include lesson plans, and those lesson plans kind of support the civic side of things. This is the building where bills become law, so that's kind of where we specialize. But for the Oregon history side, that's something that we really try to refer out to the people who are the experts. And so we have a link on the website to the lesson plans that were developed by the tribes. And I'll make sure that that gets sent out with the resources that Amy sends, because that's a really important part of Oregon's history. Thank you for that question, Bob. And I have time for one more probably. Grant has a hand. I don't think I've called on Grant yet.
Is there any reason in particular that the Oregon flag is two-sided?
That's a great question. I don't know why they chose the 2 sides, but that's great that you pointed that out. We are actually the only state in the country that has 2 sides. So the one side has our state seal, and for those who aren't familiar, the other side has the Oregon beaver, which is our state animal. Thank you, Grant.
Miss Leslie, thank you so much for being a part of this today. You were awesome, and you all were a great audience. Thank you so much for being so awesome with Miss Leslie and for your awesome questions with her. Thank you. I will definitely be in touch, and I'll share this video with you once we get it uploaded. Can you all give Miss Leslie a virtual wave of thank you? It was awesome of you to join us today. Such a cool video, and thank you for the resources. All of you, my friends, I will share those with your teachers and also put it on our website where the virtual recordings are, so you can see them there if you want. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read, and you certainly don't have to stay for that. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure. And thank you all for your great questions, and hope to have you at the Capitol in person someday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, my friends. So the book I chose today is B is for Beaver. I'm going to turn off my background here. Not that, but this, so that you can see the book better. And this is called B is for Beaver, an Oregon Alphabet. And this book is actually in every single library, I believe, in our school district. So if this is one you will want to engage further in, because there's lots of extra details in here that I'm not going to read because we're running short on time. But I chose this book not only because it's about our state and some awesome places around it, but it also is a poem. It's written in a poem form, and April is Poetry Month. So of course we have to have another poetry book, right? But it also has some pretty cool facts. I skipped the title page here. So it's called B is for Beaver, an Oregon alphabet, written by Marie and Roland Smith and illustrated by Michael Royden. And I'll show you just how much information is in each of these books. A is for Astoria, a fort built long ago. Trappers and Native Americans helped to make it grow. And you can see that you can get lots more information about Astoria, which was one of the first, it's actually the oldest American settlement this side of the Rockies. B is for the Beaver State, Oregon's other name, trapped to near extinction, the beaver still remains. So we're also known as the Beaver State. And originally when people got here, they hunted beavers so much that they almost became extinct. C is for cowboys and also for clowns. The Pendleton Roundup brings them both to town. And that's a rodeo that happens over in Pendleton, Oregon. D is for the Douglas fir, Oregon state tree. Tall up to the sky it grows, tilt far back to see. E is for egg, but not the kind you eat. Oregon's rock is the thunder egg made by volcanic heat. F is for fossils. Find them near John Day. Camels, sloths, and saber-tooth, their prints are on display. Do you remember when we visited the Museum of Natural and Cultural History? We learned about the fossils that they found in Oregon. And do you remember seeing that, the fossils of the giant sloth? And this gives you more information about the fossils. Remember, there were no dinosaurs have been found in Oregon yet. G is for the gorge where the Columbia River runs. See rocky cliffs, waterfalls, and windsurfers having fun. H is for Hell's Canyon. Did you know? It's one of the deepest in the world. Watch out below. I is for island. Crater Lake has two, Wizard and Phantom Ship, on top of a lake so blue. J is for Joseph, a Nez Perce tribal chief. They took his land forever, causing his people grief. K, a horse of different color is what some people say about the Kiger Mustang, which starts with the letter K. L is for lion with a different kind of roar. These live and play in caves along our rocky shore. And we learned all about these when we had our Ocean Adventures field trip with Carrie Newell. We got to see some of these up close and personal. M is for Marionberries, an original Oregon sweet. Eat them plain or make a pie, a perfect summer treat. These are good ones. N is for Nike, one coach's dream about a better shoe to help his team. And this is in Oregon because Nike originated here, and the two men who started Nike actually attended the University of Oregon, and they've funded a lot of the buildings. Do you remember when we went to go visit the athletic facility on Oregon State, at Oregon University of Oregon? These two, Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight, are featured in there, and they started Nike. O is for the Oregon Trail, bringing wagon loads of pioneers traveling from Missouri with plans for new frontiers. P is for Pacific, the ocean to our west. Whales, while migrating, stop near shore to rest. We learned all about them at our Ocean Adventures field trip as well. Q is for the Quimbies, who lived in Klickitat Street. Ramona Beezus and Henry Huggins would all be fun to meet. Now, I don't know if you know, but Beverly Cleary, who wrote all the books about Ramona and Beezus, she's an Oregon author who actually grew up on Klickitat Street in Portland, Oregon. And she recently died at the age of 104. She has a fabulous legacy, and we will miss her literature greatly. But your libraries all have Ramona and Beezus books in them. So look for Beverly Cleary books. Portland is the city of roses, and roses start with R. Their fragrance and many colors bring folks from near and far. S is for Salem. Visit during our state fair. The capital of Oregon has many things to share. We just learned all about that. T is for Timberline. On the slopes of Mount Hood, ski year round near this giant lodge of stone and wood. U is for Union on our flag and seal, also for the USS Oregon, battleship of steel. V is for volcanoes. Oregon has quite a few, but it's been some time since any of them blew. W is for Willamette, a valley green and grand. Farmers came from far and wide to work this fertile land. Oops, I'm not turning pages. There we go. X is for X-ray, used by this scientific man, famous for work on crystals and a nuclear weapons ban. This is Linus Pauling, and he's actually the only man to ever win 2 Nobel Prizes all on his own. And yeah, he was born in Portland. Y is for the patch of yellow found on Oregon state bird, which is the meadowlark. Walk through eastern sagebrush where many can be heard. Z is for the Oregon Zoo. Bring along some friends. It's a wonderful place to visit as this alphabet ends. Thank you. So this book, B is for Beaver, you can find it in your libraries in the 975. So in the Dewey section, in the 975 section, right there, sorry, under SMI for the first 3 letters of the author's last name. And you can check that book out to learn all about the specifics of all the things that I read. I'm so glad you joined me today. And right now I'm just looking up to make sure. So next week we have a fun field trip to the Willamette. It's a wildlife area, and we're going to get to see some cool things. We're going to walk out through a preserve and see some different sorts of animals and wildlife that are in that area. And it's a preservation, it's protected land, and it's a natural water preserve too. So we'll see birds, and I think we're going to try to look for some frogs and snakes. So I totally hope you can join me. It was fabulous to see you all today. And thank you for being such great listeners and participants. And I can't wait to see you again next week. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you later.